right, we are live on Facebook. Good evening, everybody. I am Dan Collins. I'm the board president of the LVM Neighborhood Association. And I want to welcome everybody to the candidate forum for the two folks running for the District 16 seat, representing our neighborhood on the Madison City Council. Those two candidates are J.L. Curry and Kim Richmond. Thank you two for joining us this evening. The ENA is proud to be able to bring this event to you through our elections subcommittee. And if you want to know more about the ENA, what we do for this neighborhood, you can visit our website, theena.org. Tonight's forum will be moderated by board members Pete Schramm and CJ Rouse. And I will turn it over to Pete to tell us more about tonight's forum. Pete.
Thank you, Dan. Tonight, we'll be hearing from both candidates on a number of issues facing our neighborhood as well as the greater Madison area. We'll start with opening statements. Before we go into the topics, alternating which candidate will go first on each topic. We will remind the candidates that this is a forum, not a debate setting. We ask that the answers really be focused on your ideas and plans if elected, and not directed at your opponent. If time allows, we'll take some questions from those of you who have joined us on Facebook Live. We will have a timer for each period of time. It'll be visible here. We won't try to slam the door on anybody if we go over, but after a couple sentences, we'll be moving along so we can all get our answers and have a pleasant rest of our evening afterwards. So we again thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to be able to bring these to you, and we're going to start with opening statements, starting with Ms. Curry.
Thank you, Pete, and thank you, CJ, for facilitating, and Dan and everyone else behind the scenes for making sure that this happened tonight. Hello, everyone. I'm J.L. Curry, if you haven't met me before, and I've had the honor of serving as the District 16 Alder since April 2021. So obviously the aldermanic terms are 2 years, and I'm seeking re-election. There's a steep learning curve with being an alder. It's such a rewarding job, but also challenging. And so part of the reason why I'm running or seeking re-election is to continue building upon the work and knowledge that I have inherited after 2 years. And serving in various serving in various boards, commissions, and committees of the city, as well as serving for the last year in council leadership as the council vice president. I bring my lived experience of being a born and raised Madisonian on the East Side, as well as being a social service provider working and specializing within housing and homeless services. That was really the reason or the precipice that provoked me to run 2 years ago to address our affordability housing crisis. And so I'd like to continue building and enhancing upon the progressive work that has been achieved over the last 2 years, which includes adding finally a 9th ambulance to Madison Fire Station 14, which is in our district on Dairy Drive, as well as increasing our stock of housing and all types of housing. I'd like to continue building upon my leadership within the neighborhood as well as the council, as I see this role being a bridge between the residents and policymakers and city staff and officials. And so I look forward to engaging in conversation tonight and answering your questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Curry. Mr. Richmond, your opening statement.
Thank you, and good evening to everybody. I was born and raised in Eastmoreland, just a few miles away. My wife and I have lived in our current home in the LVM neighborhood for over 40 years, just over 40 years. Our 2 kids went through the public school system, LVM, Senate, La Follette. I know the neighborhoods, I know the people. Most importantly, I listen and communicate with the people. I've got a track record of bringing people together through the Good Neighbor Project with over 1,000 members. I bring people together to discuss issues and try to solve those neighborhood issues. Just getting out since late January, I've sensed the need for more responsiveness and better representation in the 16th district. As our city continues to grow, we need to provide public safety. We need to incentivize homes and apartments that everybody can afford to live in. We need to provide public transit that serves those who rely on it as their primary means of transportation. Our older adults and our folks with disabilities need easy access and safe and reliable transportation. With the BRT, I feel we are losing some of these bus stops, and if elected, I will make sure that they are taken care of as far as getting to their buses. We need to narrow the disparity rates in our city. We're supposed to be a progressive city, and that's not a statistic we want to be any part of. We need more of an open process on the Common Council. We need more transparency and accountability in city government. We need to bring residents' voices to the table before any decisions are made in the city. If you elect me, I will be accountable for everything I do, and everything I do will be transparent. So in closing on this, I will come to the table, and I want everybody to come to the table, not just one side or the other side, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Richmond. I will now turn it over to my partner in crime, CJ Rouse, who will start our first topic.
Thank you very much. And to start, thank you both, and thank you all for joining us here tonight. To start off tonight, the question of public safety comes up. And I would like to know, as an alder, how do you plan to address those that perceive a decline in public safety here in Madison? And we're going to start off with Mr. Richmond tonight.
Thank you. One of the roles of the Common Council is to keep the community safe. In my opinion, right now, not just my opinion, but many others, right now, public safety is the biggest problem in the city. I've heard it firsthand going door to door the last 6 weeks or so. Many alders aren't addressing the issue, or maybe they're just putting Band-Aids on it. I support appropriately funded first responders, and that includes the Madison Police Department, the Madison Fire Department and their paramedics, and the CARES team. The CARES team should be fully funded during the budget process, and there should be no amendments made during the process to take any funds away from the police department or any other first responders. CARES should be fully funded at budget time, as I mentioned. If elected, I have an idea where I would get a public/private union, and the private sector could help fund that CARES program. As far as police calls, Madison is a safe place overall, but try and tell that to somebody who is a victim. Go no further than anybody on your block where they've had a car stolen, where they've been assaulted. I've been working to get people to come together to solve these issues and figure out what the root problems are, the root causes, and get them solved.
Thank you, Mr. Richmond. Ms. Curry, would you like me to repeat the question for you?
I was just going to ask, you read my mind. Yes, please.
Perfect, I got you. As an alder, how do you respond to those who are perceiving a decline in public safety?
Sure. Thanks for the question. So I can understand and empathize. I've only spent 35, almost 36 years on this earth, but Madison has changed significantly from the time that I was in school to now raising my own kids. And so one thing that is very evident from working with Chief Barnes and his assistant chiefs is that he is very focused on providing data-driven, evidence-based practices in law enforcement. Time and time again, he has been part of press releases or made statements to the media signifying that we do have crime, but that crime is declining. And so I think there's also a level of understanding and empathy and openness to hearing about some of the experiences of folks who may have experienced or witnessed crime themselves. I understand how invasive and intrusive it must feel to have your vehicle stolen or know that someone was in your home. And so being able to listen to those perspectives point to some of the data, but also point to some of the resources in the city and other services. When we think about public safety, oftentimes we automatically go towards law enforcement. But as Mr. Richmond just precluded, it involves all of our first responders. So our fire department, police department. And so making sure that our residents are also aware of services to them, like our victim witness protection, or those who serve victims of crime, and be open to hearing that, but also be open to providing realistic, factual statistics regarding our crime rates in Madison.
Thank you very much.
Our next topic deals with housing and development. The lack of affordable housing in Madison has been a long-running problem and really isn't likely going away considering the projected population growth of the region. Changes have been made. The city council had a recent change to the zoning code, but the lack of housing stock remains an issue. What are some strategies the city should look at to alleviate that housing issue, whether in the short term or in the long term? And we'll start with Ms. Curry.
Very important question, as affordable housing or trying to solve our affordability crisis is very near and dear and passionate to me in terms of policy. So we have already started some of this movement at the city level. And so if reelected, I'd like to dig a little deeper. Obviously, municipal governments are only able to control certain things, but working in collaboration with our county board supervisors, with our flagship university, UW-Madison, as well as our state legislator and beyond. We definitely need to dig deeper because we are going to continue being faced with affordability issues, especially the way our economy is at this state, and still being very much in a global pandemic. So one of those ways that I think we should approach this issue is currently looking at our affordable housing units that the city either provides tax breaks for or provides to our citizens. And making sure that we're expanding the cap on how long those units can be affordable. Right now, the general time frame is 40 years, so looking to increase that, but also supporting city staff who are currently reviewing those processes. We also need to continue deepening and enhancing our relationships with developers. We need to focus on creating more housing stock, but we also need to make sure that these developments and the creation of these things are an investment in our community, that they're an investment of our values, and that they're an investment of the neighbors who make up that community themselves. I see I'm close to time, so I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Ms. Curry. Mr. Richmond, what do you think are some strategies you would pursue to address the housing issues in Madison?
Thanks, Pete. We've got to have incentives for first-time home buyers, possibly young families that can only afford to rent. We've got to make incentives for developers to make housing more affordable. All of these apartments going up here on the Far East Side, they're $1,500, $2,000 a month for 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, even studio apartments in some areas. There's got to be incentives for first-time purchasers, young families, maybe even with first-time buyers, have some forbearance in their interest rates or something to make it a lot easier for them to get in. But it all comes down to the city and the county and the developers and the realtors coming together and helping solve this, along with residents. The residents can't be left out. I mean, if the residents don't have anything to say about it, then it's going to continue to get out of hand like it is. I believe the number was we've added 4,000 units last year, and that's still not enough. We've got to build, but build responsibly. We also have to build more homes, not just these tightly packed apartments that don't give people a sense of pride. I mean, you're coming home from work and you're going into an apartment. Let's make it more let's make it easy for first-time home buyers, or even people that can't afford a home. Let's make it easier for them to afford a home, and they can have some pride in on their own property. So I guess everything, just bringing everybody together. You've got to get the realtors and the developers, and I'm talking locally. Use the local trades, use the local realtors, the local developers first and foremost. And that keeps the jobs in Madison with Madisonians.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Richmond. CJ, can you take us into our next topic?
Absolutely. Our next topic will be asking how in your role as an alder do you plan on addressing the needs and the concerns of those experiencing homelessness in our community? And that would start with Mr. Richmond again.
Well, we're heading in the right direction, but we're not doing enough, obviously. The Dairy Drive homes, I don't have the most recent stats, but we've got to the people that are there, we've got to help them find jobs. We've got to get them back on their feet. And we can't have them dependent on a 10 by 10 or an 8 by 8 house. We've got to help them get back on their feet, get back on the streets. We've got to get these homeless shelters, homeless facilities near transit. The Dairy Drive is, these people can't, I see a lot of them have bikes. I mean, there's not a bus stop there. And with bus rapid transit, I don't know where the nearest bus stop will be. We've got to make it easier for the homeless to get to those jobs and then make their money and then get out of this temporary housing and again, get into somewhere where they can afford with incentives and maybe, again, interest forbearance or payment forbearance, get them back on their feet till they get comfortable. But just moving them around isn't going to do it. They're proud people. They don't want to be stuck in these little homes or in a shelter. They want to be out and have jobs. So that's one thing I would do, is help them get back on their feet.
Thank you very much, Mr. Richmond. JL, would you like me to repeat the question again? Absolutely. How, in your role as Alder, do you plan to address the needs and concerns of those experiencing homelessness?
Sure. So again, as I had shared in my opening statement, this is what I do for work. I work at the YWCA Madison, where I'm approaching my 8th year anniversary, and the affordability and homelessness issues that were front and center about 4 to 3 years ago prompted me to run to bring that experience from being a direct service practitioner and now someone who oversees and manages programs intended to serve formerly homeless families and women. So one of the biggest things is we have to stop othering. We just talked about the affordability crisis in housing. If you take time to listen to testimonies or immerse yourself in those experiences, you'd know that many experiencing homelessness are gainfully employed, or it's a struggle to keep employment when you're trying to figure out where you're going to lay your head at each night. So being supportive of creating, first off, funding to create purpose-built shelters. We've seen that done with our men's shelter and moving out of congregated, crowded, unsafe church basements into finally having a facility where folks can get multiple needs met. We also need to continue looking at what are the tools and resources that folks are saying are barriers to them keeping their housing. I'm not a religious person, but a spiritual person. And so oftentimes I make the analogy of instead of giving folks fish, teaching them how to fish. And so providing those tools, skills, and resources that folks are saying that they need, but also seeing our folks experiencing homelessness as our neighbors and residents instead of othering them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I will hand you guys off back to Pete.
Thanks, CJ. The next question, and we've actually touched on it a few times, but we'll deal with mass transit. And Madison is going through the first major redesign of the mass transit system in over 20 years. In fact, if you're moving around town, we've seen construction start on some of the stops of the intended BRT system. It's generally accepted that an overhaul of the transit system is well overdue, but admittedly, there are concerns about how it will serve the population. So what do you think the greatest benefits and challenges are of the redesign, and how would you address them? And we'll start with Ms. Kerr.
Really important question. And I know that there's a lot of changes happening right now, but I hear of BRT and the network redesign being used interchangeably. They're not the same. So the network redesign is kind of looking towards our current routes and redesigning what the system is. So when I was in school, I remember that I rode the J bus from home to my school. Obviously, we have a numbered bus system now, so the transition from lettered to numbered buses was part of the redesign, and that happened decades ago. So it's beyond time because, again, in my full-time work or working directly with folks who need to rely on public transit as their primary means of getting around, have been telling us for decades as well that our current system is not conducive to their needs. There's long wait times, there's not frequency. Our bus transfers, I think they're called transfer points, at the time when we implemented them were working. They're not working. And so the BRT is one of the solutions created to mitigate some of that. The intent is for our routes to be faster, more reliable, and use larger buses to transport more folks. Also looking at being economically, environmentally friendly. And for instance, we've purchased an entire fleet of electric buses for the BRTs. I think we need to look at, I know that there was controversy or concern about the bus routes, but also at time when you're a leader, you need to make decisions. And I feel that moving forward with deciding what the redesign was, with implementing some amendments, is a movement forward, but isn't signed, sealed, delivered, where we can't go back and make reconsiderations based on the experience of those we're trying to attract to use the BRT and use the redesigned system.
Thank you, Ms. Curry. And I think any longtime East Sider appreciates the shout out to the long deceased J route. I was a rider of that myself. Mr. Richmond, when we're looking at the mass transit redesign, you said you're a longtime East Sider. How do you think a redesign of the transit system fits into your plans that you would chase as a city councilman?
Well, I have a couple of concerns, and I mentioned one of them earlier, and that's the loss of some of the bus stops. We can't have older adults, we can't have people with disabilities having to walk 10 or 15 minutes to bus stops that have been removed. If elected, I will work out some type of a system, whether it's a trolley system or reinstate some of these bus stops that would get these people to the BRT stops. As far as rapid transit, I hope it is, because we need something to get across town. But I'm worried about, again, I'm worried about the people that are not on that route or near that route. To me, it would be defeating a purpose, but we'll see. It's going forward, and we'll see what happens. We'll support it, but we can make it better. As far as tearing up the streets, it seems like we just did that not too long ago. I am not a city planner. I would think there would have been a better way to set these stops up, but again, it is what it is. It's going forward, and we'll support it, but we will make it better. There are too many concerns as far as the cost, and will it sustain itself? Is it going to cost us more than $40 a month or a year registration? I don't know if that's the maximum, but that's a regressive tax, and it has a lot of people worried that are on fixed incomes or low income. So there's a few concerns, but who can't be kind of excited about electric buses and rapid transit? So we'll see how it goes.
Thank you, Mr. Richmond. CJ, take us into our next topic.
Thank you very much. Tonight, I'd like to learn more about what you think of there being a possible divide between the east and the west side of Madison when it comes to the receiving of funding and attention. And we'll start with Mr. Richmond again.
Well, being a lifelong East Sider, except for a couple of years, there's always been this perception that West Side dirt is more expensive than East Side dirt. I don't know if that's true. I don't know the exact numbers, but as far as I've read things regarding money distribution to schools, for example, which aren't fair. Things should be equally split between the east, west side, north side, south side, not just east and west. This is a city. We're all together in this. I don't know if you were speaking about, if the person was speaking about anything in particular, any particular disparity in funding. Were they talking about parks or anything? But we're growing up on the east side, everything should be equal. I mean, growing up on any side of town, everything should be equal. So unless I'm not catching the question totally, I'll leave it at that, I guess, because like I said, growing up, I heard the West Side dirt was more expensive, but I don't know if that's true or not.
Yes, the question was to speak to the perception of a divide between funding and attention received via the government,
Well,
local government towards the east side.
I have friends on all sides of town and we're all the same. So that's the way I look at it.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mr. Richmond. Ms. Curry, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay.
All right. So, perception isn't always reality. I'll be honest, when I was campaigning 2 years ago, that was something that I heard a lot, that it seems that the east and north sides get dumped on and the west side gets the glitzy glamoury things. I can't say that I fully buy into that, but I can see and I've experienced dynamics of those impacts. So for instance, when you're talking about public safety, looking at where we have decided to put our permanent shelters or where to place our temporary shelters when we moved from COVID, and in working with our police department and the captains and them knowing the changing demographics since they've been in the department, a lot of the that sometimes can increase calls for service. And so trying to understand, planning is a very intricate, complex thing that thankfully there are experts, but to even understand how the city approaches planning. I sit on the Plan Commission. I wasn't appointed to it for the full totality of 2 years, but I'm still learning. And so there is exclusions that by maybe default or maybe intent way back were provided exclusion and kind of aided into some of the things that we're seeing. I know, for instance, when I was doing direct service and trying to help homeless families locate housing, oftentimes the south and west sides had more isolated pockets of affordable or subsidized housing. And so I can't say that the perception is necessarily reality, but I think it just creates an impetus to continue having these community-wide conversations and making sure that residents are understanding why locations are being looked at for certain things and what can or can't be done to change any of that.
Thank you very much, Ms. Curry. Back to Pete.
Thank you, CJ. For those joining out on Facebook Live on the ENA Facebook page, if you are interested in a question that we might pull from at the end, feel free to drop it in the comments, and our illustrious president, Dan, is keeping an eye on that. For our next question, I'd like to be a little self-serving and turn our attention to our little pocket of the world, District 16 and Albion in general. And just, if you thought, it's so easy to think about the big picture, and we always talk about these Madison-wide issues. But if there was one issue facing not even necessarily Madison, but our own neck of the woods that you'd like to address heavily in the next 2 years, what would that issue be? And we'll start with Ms. Curry.
Thank you. This is a really great question. So thank you for whoever posed it. We have schools within our district, some within walking. I know CJ has his walking school bus to Elvium. We have Alice, Senate, La Follette, but we also have students who are traveling far ways to get to those schools. So, for instance, families that live in like the Rimrock, Southdale area. Investing in our youth is investing in our future. And as I've come to learn about specific housing developments, public works projects, our partnership with the school district, or I forget the term, but there's a collaborative of the school district, the city, the county, MATC. And so whenever decisions need to be made about I forget what it is, so I'm not going to spend too much time. But anyways, there's collaboration, and with investing in our youth, also needs to recognize that the Goodman Community Center and the East Madison Community Center are not our neighborhood community centers. They may be on the east side, but they're not located in any of our District 16 neighborhoods. So therefore, create another barrier of accessibility for the youth and families that live within District 16. It's quite a heavy lift, and it definitely, I will not say that it can be accomplished in 2 years, but I would like to see us work to either enhance partnerships. For instance, there is a large community center that the Ho Chunk Nation has that is within our district. It's also in between a neighborhood or neighborhoods that feel very divided from Madison. And I'm talking about the neighborhoods that are south of 51 that border McFarland. So what I would say is I would love to see some synergy or at least movement towards creating more community for our youth and a safe place for them to go and create that community with their peers.
Thank you very much, Ms. Curry. Mr. Richmond, again, looking just not on the macro level of Madison, but at the more micro level of the Elvium neighborhood, what is one big issue that you would like to address within our community?
Neighborhood safety, community safety, hands down. I've been knocking on doors since late January, early February. After I tell them why I'm there, who I am, introduce myself, I ask their concerns. Public safety, whether it's speeding down streets, whether it's shots fired incidents, whether it's fights, assaults, it's the number one issue. We must get, I have been working with this Good Neighbor Project. We partner with the police department in a small way. We try to get to the bottom of things. We try to get people together. We do get people together and we talk about the problems. Why are they caused and how we can prevent them? We need a properly funded police department. Our police department is short on staff. Talk to anybody. They're short on staff, period. They're going from call to call right now, and many times they're on priority calls only. That is not a safe way to run a city. A properly staffed police department is expensive, but what's more expensive is a bad police department. These women and men are on overtime. They're working weekends when they shouldn't be. That's causing stress. It's causing them to be tired, and we don't need tired and stressed out people in any position or in any job. So a properly staffed police department and a community-based policing, which is getting out in the public, engaging with the public ahead of time. I don't want my officer in my neighborhood to come here only when there's a problem. I want him to come here walking down the street to say hi. So public safety, hands down, is the number one issue I've heard for weeks, and I believe it.
Thank you, Mr. Richmond. CJ, can you take us into our next topic?
Absolutely. And for this next question, you'll get a little bit more time. You'll get 3 minutes to answer. We're moving into questions of budget. Now, as you move to balance this next budget and manage the realities of a tight city budget, particularly one with limited remaining funds from the COVID era funding, how will you navigate those constraints and what will be your priorities that you focus on in this next budgeting session? And that'll start with Mr. Richmond.
Could you please repeat that, CJ?
Oh, absolutely. As you deal with the budgeting session, this upcoming budgeting session, and you have restrictions relating to limited COVID-era funding, how do you plan on balancing those constraints, and which priorities will you be focusing on come budget time?
Good question. First of all, I will say that our public safety, which will be police, fire, EMS, and CARES, should not be cut. Nothing should be cut there. We need our essential services. We need our trash picked up. We need our streets plowed. We need our streets repaired. So we have to be careful there. Essential services are just that, they're essential. We have, because of this COVID area spending, the city got really reckless. They're paying off bills here, paying for things here, paying for things there. And now we're going to be in trouble here the upcoming years because of that. We should have been more responsible. There are working with all of the committees. That's another thing where there's way too many committees. We've got to tighten these committees up a little bit and get down to where things are more concentrated and get more things done. But there's going to have to be cuts, but we're going to have to look and see how some of the departments and some of the people that are receiving money are using it properly. And let's see the results of the money that we gave them so we can decide on whether to continue their funding or to cut their funding. But we can't cut essential services. We can't cut first responders. That's what we are here for. We moved to Madison for those services. So we're going to have to be very, very careful where we cut, but we're going to have to do our due diligence and concentrate on which ones to cut, which ones not to cut.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mr. Richmond. On to Ms. Curry. Would you like me to repeat the question?
That'd be great. Thank you.
Absolutely. As you move towards the process of balancing budget constraints and your own priorities of budgeting, how do you plan on moving forward with your budget priorities while navigating slowly shrinking budgets?
Thank you. Great question. Thank you for the extra time too, because it's definitely a layered answer. So how do I start this? There's a lot of like political academic language that's used that I think isn't necessarily a shared definition. And so understanding what our levy limit means. I think we've heard it a lot if you've watched the mayoral debates or even read candidate questionnaires. So what that means is under the Walker administration, when we had Governor Walker, there were bills put into effect that imposed levy limits on states. We are one of those. And so that means that there's a cap or a limit on how much we can raise property taxes to create revenue and municipal fees to pay revenue. So I hate to use the word trick because it's not a trick, but to balance a budget, you have to look at multi-dimensional aspects. We saw a wheel tax fee added when we go register our vehicles, a forestry charge added to our water bill, and most recently a resource recovery charge fee added. And I know that I spoke with many of you who were upset about that, and the line to quote, or that I heard often, was, "We can't rely or balance our budget on the back of taxpayers." Concurrently, or complex enough, we also need to be able to provide for the high quality services we've come to cherish and rely upon. So our trash pickup, plowing our streets. We also saw a budget a budget process where another state imposed challenge and barrier was many of our city and municipal employees losing their right to collectively bargain or be part of a union. And so we dealt with wage parity issues within our last budget process. That was very controversial because you're talking about people's livelihood. So there's a lot to balance. One thing that I appreciated last year was the city's movement towards creating as much of a participatory budget process as possible. So what that looks like is inviting the residents of our city in to understand how our budget works, our executive budget or our capital budget versus our operating budget. But having community members provide feedback or help us decide what our priorities to you to spend on pieces of our public budget. So I would say participatory budget process, but also calling upon our state legislature to our state legislation to help us increase some of the already imposed levy limits.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Curry. Pete, did you have any questions from the audience?
I have one that I have a question for myself because I just thought of it and it's fun. And also we have a question off the budget, so I'd like to have something a little more lighthearted. And because I think this is a fun race because speaking as a lifelong East Sider, we have lifelong East Siders running to represent the East Side. And that's I think a unique ability for a neighborhood like ours to have. So I would just like to know what do you love about the East Side? What is it about our side of town that really fires you up to represent it? And we'll start with Ms. Curry.
I like that question. Wow, I was not anticipating a fun question, Pete. Well, I've only known the East Side. It's pretty embarrassing, but I will often tell people I'm navigationally challenged. So I know the streets. I'm a landmark driver. You know, you turn right on the Quick Trip or the Walgreens or whatever have you, the school. And the West Side is still kind of a foreign place to me. I have to use my navigation and GPS often to go places that I don't frequent. So I like the accessibility. I love the fact that I'm close to the Beltline, to the interstate. My family and I do a lot of traveling, but I also love all of the parks that we have. And being in this role has also motivated, challenged, welcomed me to understand more about the neighborhoods that I live in and the residents and neighbors who frequent those. I would like to see more restaurants. I was pretty devastated when Kukos left the East Side. But looking at our industrial growth too, and knowing that we have local businesses coming back that are strengthening after the COVID pandemic. So shout out to Red Rooster. If you haven't been there yet, I would encourage you to go. Not only do they have good food and drinks, but they have live entertainment, and they were able to, I won't say repurpose, but reestablish the former Knuckle Down Saloon. So the East Side is the only way I know, and it's the only way I'd be, and I love it for so many reasons, but we don't have enough time.
Oh, and I did the unmuted Zoom thing. Thank you, Ms. Curry. Mr. Richmond, again, you said you started in Eastmoreland, came over here. What fires you up to potentially represent the East Side?
Bottom line, it's the people. It's the district. I've been a volunteer for the neighborhood association on and off for many years. It's the people. We're real people. We're hardworking people. We get along for the most part. We can have differing opinions for the most part and get along. I had plenty of opportunities to leave when I was younger and our kids were younger, but we liked the schools. We liked the area. Alder Curry mentioned the proximity to the interstate. We can be on the interstate to Chicago in minutes, to Milwaukee in minutes, to the Dells in minutes, shopping in the area. but it comes back to the people. Everybody's friendly. The neighborhoods. I have people from other sides of town come to visit me, and they said, "Oh, I love your neighborhood. I love your neighborhood. The trees, the canopies. Where I live in fall, the goldens turn really golden. I can't remember the name of the trees, but I mean they are a bright yellow, and it actually is like lights lighting up." Small homes, big homes, medium-sized homes, the properties, the trees, the parks. It's just my home. And the day I leave, it'll be sad. But at bottom line, it's the people.
Thank you very much, Mr. Richmond. CJ, we had a question from the audience come in.
Absolutely. As Alder, how do you plan to effectively communicate and engage in outreach with your constituents? And we'll start with Mr. Richmond.
Well, those of you who know me know I've been saying this for a few years now, 4 years. I'll meet with anybody, anytime, anywhere, at your convenience. Not my convenience, at your convenience. I'll talk to anybody about anything. I've done it myself. I've gone to all different neighborhood meetings, east, west, north, south, to hear, just to sit in the back of the room and listen and learn what's going on. I will reach out to everybody, anybody at any time. And I sincerely mean that. I'm not a politician. I've already done it. I've met with people who wanted to learn more about me here in the last couple of months, and they've all been positive. Whether I won them over, I don't know, but they liked what they heard. I like sitting down with people. Today, I had somebody call me from out of state that has they have relatives in the 16th district, and we're wondering what's going on. And I just told them, I tell them the truth. I tell them facts. So I will again. I just will sit down with anybody. I have in the past, and I will continue. And I enjoy it. I enjoy sitting down with people that we may not agree on things. And in the long run, it turns out we have a lot in common. I had a gentleman tell me that a couple of months ago. We sat down for a short time, and we said, we've got a lot in common. And if people would just sit down and talk and not politicize everything, that's what I'm about. This is a nonpartisan position, and with me, it will be truly nonpartisan. As an independent thinker, voter, it will be that way. So I will sit down with anybody. I'll sit down on the street corner if you want.
Thank you, Mr. Richmond. And for Jael, I'll repeat it for you. As Alder, what is your plan for communication and outreach for your constituents?
Thank you. So I'll be honest, 2 years ago, my answer was a little different, and I realized it's challenging. So we recently redistricted our aldermanic districts as well as our county lines. And we have 14,000, give or take, plus residents within District 16. When as data driving the campaign, when I'm looking at past elections and numbers, we fall very short of the amount of folks that we could have voting. So 3,000 out of 14,000. That to me is an engagement in itself, that we're not reaching everyone. I won't pretend that I am a robot and that I have limitless amounts of time, because being an alder is also being responsive to your city appointments, going to your meetings, going to council meetings, creating and working with staff on policy, going to neighborhood meetings. There's a lot to do. And our residents resoundingly have said that they don't want full-time politicians being their alders. So I do take pride in having a full-time job that also puts me in spaces to increase my engagement with our community. I would like to continue building upon multiple tools, whether that's social media, whether that's use of our my city blog or city update. We also, just for the first time in history ever, have 5 positions in our Common Council office is considered fully staffed. And one of those positions is a community engagement strategist. So she's not yet a year into her job, but I am encouraged and hopeful with that added position and added capacity within the council office to receive some assistance to do more in terms of engagement, while also being responsible to my other tasks as an alder.
Thank you very much. Pete, any more questions from?
We're going to move into, as we're getting close to our hour, we're going to move into our closing statements. For both candidates, we'll give each candidate 3 minutes to kind of wrap up the evening before we finish it up for the evening. We will start with Ms. Curry.
Thank you. It hasn't even felt like an hour. So thank you all for tuning in tonight and being engaged in the process of figuring out who your next representative will be. I obviously would be very honored to have your support to continue doing this work, as we have multiple critical choices upon us. We have to decide who our next mayor is, who our next city representatives on the Common Council will be, as well as who will be our next Wisconsin Supreme Court Justice. So no small feat at all, but being here is part of that, and of making informed decisions at the polls. Our city is growing, not just in population, but in diversity of culture, of identity, of thought, and more. And I take my job as being an alder, I don't take it lightly. I take it as being a position that isn't inherently powerful, but the power platform, I would say, that comes with it should be used responsibly. And for me, that means making sure that it's unrealistic to think that we could agree, everyone will always agree with you 100% of the time, but to make sure that you're serving the many and not the few. And so I believe my abilities, my deep network of having grown up here, my identities of diversity of being a Black woman, a single parent, former teen mom, a child of a first generation immigrant, and a social service provider in our community for over a decade, provides a deep network to use that platform in ways that serve the many and not the few. I also would be remiss to not mention the collaborations and partnerships that I've formed with my peers on the council. After a year of serving, my peers decided to elect me to be council vice president. And so that also holds a platform or an ability to move things. And I'm a mover and a shaker, and I want to keep moving our city forward towards progressiveness that encompasses all of the changes that our city is going towards. So with me comes authenticity, compassion, and bold leadership, but most importantly, a candidate who isn't focused on one dimension or one policy focus. Again, I'd be honored to have your support to continue enhancing this work and the qualities by electing me on April 4th. You can check out more about me and the campaign at jlcurry.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Curry. Mr. Richmond, your closing statement.
Thanks, Pete, and thanks, CJ, for the questions, and thank you, Alder Curry, for attending as well. I bring people together. I've been doing it now for 4 years since I fully retired. I have the time to serve the people of the 16th district, which is why I say I can meet anytime, anywhere, any place. I'll go at their convenience. I love the East Side. I want to continue to live here. I want it to continue to be safe. And where it's not safe, I will do everything I can to make it more safe. I will bring common sense to the Common Council. If elected, I will go up to every alder who I know, who I don't know. I'll introduce myself and tell them it'll be an honor and a pleasure to work with them. I'm all about accountability. I'm all about transparency. That not only goes for the Common Council, but also the police department. I fully support body-worn cameras on the Madison Police Department. It's the biggest tool for modern day policing. It's been dragged through committee after committee after committee now for years. Let's get the pilot program off and running and see what the results are. And I think 90% of the public are in favor of them. Why is Madison's a progressive city? Why are we so far behind on this? So that's where accountability, again, I'll bring common sense to the Common Council. I might bring a little levity, but I will be the mouthpiece of the people of the 16th district by listening to their concerns, going to each individual neighborhood. I found out the last few weeks, the Door Creek area has got totally different issues than Secret Places, Owl Creek. But the number one concern comes down to public safety, but they're just in a different way. So I want to make the district more safe. I want to work with the Common Council. I want to work with the mayor, not against them. And I believe by talking to people and sitting down with people, they'll learn more about me, how I feel, how independent I am, how open-minded I am. And I think they'll like working with me as well.
There we go. All right. Thank you, Mr. Richmond and Ms. Curry. That concludes tonight's forum. I'd like to thank my co-moderator, CJ Rouse, and Dan Collins, working behind the scenes to make everything go smoothly. This is an incredibly important election, and we encourage everyone to get out and vote. In-person early voting has already begun at sites all around Madison, including just down the road at the Penny branch of the Madison Public Library on Cottage Grove Road. For information about polling places, voter registrations, absentee voting, or really anything else, we encourage you to go to myvote.wi.gov to find all the information. That's myvote.wi.gov. That's your kind of one-stop shop for looking, but all of you make plans to vote on or before April 4th. Thanks again for joining us, those of you out there on Facebook Live and on the ENA page, and take care.